Hello and welcome back to another episode of TACHES Teaches. I'm Tash and this is part 3 in a series on lazy music theory. Over the last 2 videos we learnt how to form major and minor triads, 7ths, 9ths, 11ths, 13s and suspended 2 and 4 chords. We also looked at how we can use inversions to make chords sound fuller and more emotive. If you haven't yet watched the previous 2 videos, then follow the link above my head and check them out now. Today I want to talk about the easily misunderstood concept of modes. In short, modes are an incredible way to add slightly different feelings and colours to your music without actually playing any different notes, merely changing the order in which you play them. Due to this being in concept a series on lazy music theory, I'm going to try to explain them as simply as I can and in a way that will allow you to quickly start using them on your own to add slightly different colours to your palette. So without further ado, let's jump right in. In order to begin to understand the concept of modes, we need to quickly talk about keys and scales. What is a key and what is a scale? Well, a key is a set of pitches or notes that together form the tonal basis for a piece of music, whereas a scale is a set of gaps relative to its starting note that's largely responsible for creating the feel or mood of a piece of music. Consider, for example, the C major scale, which we know is all the white notes on the piano from C up until C again, C, D, E, F, G, A, B and C. I've also put a C in the bass of the piano here, just an octave lower to really ground us in that C tonality. Let's have a quick listen. I think you'll agree that it does sound very major. It's very bright and there's not much tension to it. But what is it that's making it sound that way? What if I were to tell you it's not the notes that we're playing, but it's the order in which we're playing them, and therefore the gaps between them that's creating the mood? We have a gap of 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, which equates to a major scale. 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0 equals happy, bright, not much tension. Now, because we started on the C, and because there's a C droning in the bass, once we hit this B and then into the C, you'll feel this sense of resolution, almost like we've reached home after a long journey. Let's try listening one more time again, and on this B to C, really try and focus on how resolving it feels. We've got back. So, what if I were to start this scale, this set of notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C, but I were to start it on the D, and instead of having a C droning in the bass, we'll drone a D. Let's first listen through to starting on the C with a C in the bass, and then I'll play starting on D with a D in the bass, and notice how there's a different feeling, despite using the same notes. Quite interesting. Now, because there are 7 notes in the C major scale, that gives us 7 possible starting points. Why don't we try all 7 of these now, with the note that we start on droning in the bass, and we'll see how different they all feel. So what is it that's causing that different sound between starting on different notes? Like we said that a major scale is major in its feeling because of having a gap of 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0. And the D is a gap of 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, which means that we took that first gap and we put it at the end. Each time we move down, or we move on to the next note as the starting point, the ratio of the gaps sort of rotates around itself, giving us 7 different colours for the same notes. These 7 options are the 7 modes of C major. We have C major, also called IONIAN, then we have D DORIAN, we have E PHRYGIAN, F LYDIAN, G MIXOLYDIAN, A AEOLIAN, and B LOCRIAN. As we now know, The relationship of the gaps between these notes is what defines the scale. But what now happens if I put the root to be C for all of them? On each of them, I take where we've started and we put it back to C. So each one of these will now start on C. Okay, now let's play through. So we're going to start with starting on C like we had before, but then the ratio of gaps will change. So you can see here, if I go through them, you can see that the actual spacing of the notes is different. In fact, the actual notes are now different. But let's have a listen. So modes are just scales, but they are formed through parent scales, which means that if we were to take all of the notes in the C major scale and started on the D, we have D Dorian, and the parent scale of D Dorian is C major. If we were to take E Phrygian, the parent scale of E Phrygian is C major, which means that all of those possible combinations going up through the modes, they are all based off of the C major scale. So if you started the C major scale on D major and we now had a D major scale, E Dorian's parent scale is D major. And this is the same for all of them. Once we start then moving the root back to C, so as I've done here, we have I've mapped out the individual gaps of them and I've brought them all back to C as we did in the previous video. Notice what they look like as I scroll through them now, because there are subtle variations despite still starting on C. If you were to map out all of those relationships of gaps relative to that C scale, or just a major scale, you end up with something that looks like this. Now, anywhere it says just a number, that means the regular numbers of the major scale. Anywhere it says B in a number, it just means putting the number flattened, just flattening that note, putting it to the note just one below. Anywhere it says a hash, like in Lydian here, that just means sharpening it. So making it up one note. Now, a nice easy way to be able to play any mode in any key is to just learn the C major scale. So as an example here, I have a drone in C on this tempura from Contact. Let's play this. I could play the C major scale in this guitar I've got by playing C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. If I now want to play the Dorian mode, all I have to do is take that third note, the E, and make it an E flat, and that last note, the B, make it a B flat. So notice how the mood changes quite radically. So we'll play through the C major scale first. And now we're going to flatten that third and that seventh. Let's try that with Phrygian then. So all we're going to do is flatten the second, the third, the sixth, and the seventh. So always relative to C major, it's very easy to work out what the modes are. And Lydian as well, all we have to do is sharpen that fourth. So the F goes to an F sharp. Quite dreamy, isn't it? MIXOLYDIAN as well is an easy one. All we have to do is make that top note, the B, go to a B flat. Once we get to AEOLIAN, that's just the minor scale, so we're going to flatten the third, the sixth, and the seventh. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that note there. So that's how you play C Ionian, C Dorian, C Phrygian, C Lydian, C MIXOLYDIAN, C AEOLIAN, and C LOCRIAN. But what if I wanted to play F sharp Lydian or F sharp MIXOLYDIAN? Wouldn't I have to learn totally different scales on the piano? Well, no. Once you know the C major scale and how to vary that C major scale into being any of those modes, let's change this drone now to being an F sharp, for example. So how do we get to an F sharp from a C? Is we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We go up 6 notes. So I'm pretty lazy too, and I just don't massively want to have to learn loads of different scales. So all I do is I just put a note shifter, a note pitch shifter here before, and I just go up 6. So now, as I play through with the drone in F sharp, I can still play the C major scale, but it will now be an F sharp major scale. So let's try that. And as long as you put it so that you can play the C major scale, but those notes are being shifted up 6, that means that I can now play F sharp LYDIAN quite easily. Or F sharp DORIAN. So playing with mode sounds really cool when you have a droning sound beneath it, sort of insinuating which tonality you're in, so that then you can play with the modes over the top. So instead of having a tempura, now I've got this arpeggiated bass in E. In order to get from C to E, we have to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So on the guitar, all I'll do is go up 4 semitones on here. And now, if I play a C major scale, I'm actually playing an E major scale. And then if I sharpen that 4th, I'm going to be playing an E LYDIAN. So we'll bring this up again. Let's try the E LYDIAN now. Or let's try the MIXOLYDIAN here. So very cool. It's also important to note that the alterations that you see in these scales, those are the things that are going to give that mode its sound. So if you were playing in Phrygian and you kept playing the 1st, the 4th and the 5th, so in the case of what we would class as our C major scale, even though it's being altered, if you were to focus mainly on playing that 1st note, which is C, that 4th, which is F, and that 5th, which is G, you're not really going to get the feel of that sound. So in order to create the mood of this particular mode, you really want to focus on the variations. So if I'm to play in LYDIAN here, I'm going to be playing a lot of that sharpened 4th, which is the F sharp. The more I play of that, the more I will insinuate that I'm in LYDIAN. So let's try that again, and I'll show you what happens if I don't play that sharp 4th. I can't really say that I'm playing in LYDIAN if I do this. Sounds like C major, but if I bring this in a lot, it definitely has that LYDIAN feel. So then with MIXOLYDIAN as well, I want to play that sharp, that flat 7, which is the B flat. So if I do a lot of then we really get that MIXOLYDIAN feel. So let's quickly recap then. We started out this morning with a C major scale, which we learnt was only a C major scale because it started on C and had a gap of 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0. And then when we took that scale and we started on its 2nd degree using the same notes, we ended up with something different, which was D DORIAN, which we also now know is only D DORIAN because it starts on D and has a gap of 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1. And as we went up, changing the root note to the next note, we ended up with different modes of the C major scale. Of course, when we then took all of the notes that we'd created and we shifted them back down to being C as the root, we ended up with C and then that particular mode. We then learnt that if we mapped out those changes in gaps created by cycling through the modes, we ended up with something that looked like this. As long as we're playing in C major, all of the white notes starting from C, all we need to do is alter the specific notes it says here to create that mode. If we want to play one of those modes but with a different root key, all we then need to do is change with a note pitch shifter for C to then play the actual root. So if we wanted to play in G Lydian, all we need to do is make C go to G. So from C we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We go up 7 notes. So we would change the semi to 7. And that means that if we were to play the C major scale now over something in G, we would end up with a G major. And of course, all of this then applies to that as well. So you just need to flatten the third and the seventh, which would be the E flat and then B flat, in order to create G Dorian. And finally, we learnt that in order to create the feeling of these modes, it's very important to play the notes that have been altered from the major scale. If we were playing in Phrygian and we weren't playing the second, the third, the sixth, and the seventh note, and we were just bouncing back and forth between the first, fourth, and fifth, we wouldn't really be creating that mood. It's also important with these modes to try and create sort of a grounding to allow you to express that modal tonality. So drones work very well, or sort of basses that don't really move much. In the next video, I'm going to talk about using modes in a chordal fashion, and how there are various tricks that you can use to create chords that feel Dorian or chords that feel MIXOLYDIAN, and there's various pitfalls that you can fall into which will ultimately make you sound like you're in major or minor again. Well folks, like the sun must set after even the most glorious of days, I too must once again now bid you all farewell. But let us not dwell on having to part ways, and instead remember the good times we've had together. If you wish to aid me on my humble quest of world domination, then please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on those pesky notifications. As always, happy Monday and happy creating.